So SR&ED, or Scientific Research and Experimental Development, is a tax credit that is provided for companies that can demonstrate that they are doing research and development, Canadian companies. Um, the idea is to foster innovation and research as a culture within businesses and startups here within the Canadian community. Um, and unlike grants that people are usually familiar with, right? It's money up front to say, here you go, go build something with this money that we're giving you. SR&ED comes as a credit post your expenses, meaning, let's say I'm a company, I've gone out and done some R&D. I file my taxes and then tell the CRA, hey, I've done R&D in this specific area. These are the expenses that I incurred. I'm now going to claim SR&ED. Then the CRA will be like, cool, this seems legit. I'm going to give you back X percentage of all the expenses that you're claiming. So it's like it's a credit post the expenses that you've already incurred. So it's administered um, in a way that a portion of your credit comes from the federal government and a portion comes from the provincial government. So depending on where your company is based, the rates vary slightly. But essentially, think of it as, let's say you spent like X dollars on employing an individual in Canada who's doing R&D, you get Y percentage of that back. Similar case, you've got a subcontractor whom you're employing to do R&D that is based in Canada, you get Z percentage of that back. If you're a firm that works with kind of materials in the innovation process, so think manufacturing, think electrical, think IoT, you're working with physical like hardware and stuff that you're doing research on, then you can claim some portion of the expenses that you've had on materials as well back. There are some exciting changes that have recently been made in the SR&ED program, which we can talk about later from a capital expenditures perspective. Yeah.
You know, Varsha, what's fascinating is I've talked to so many people over time over the last couple of years, and this never came up. It never came up. Like no one ever said that this program exists. So do you feel like you have to approach people and tell them that you can actually get money back? Or do people come to you knowing that this is a possibility, so can you help us get it? Do you feel like there's an educational part in what you do as well? Or you just expect
Right.
people to come to you and they already know what it is, but they need your help to get it done?
So it's an excellent question. Um, in large part, um, I don't want to say people are unaware, but I think there's a lot. There's a lot that can be done by way of education. The CRA already does kind of webinars on a regular basis, but honestly, if you don't know to look for it, you won't find it. Now, some part of it is education, right? Like knowing if you're eligible, knowing that the program exists. Um, um, be willing to like kind of commit to that process of actually claiming that as a credit. Um, so some part of it is education. Usually, like out in the wild, of course, like I'll tell people about the program. I find that within the like tech startup community, most people are kind of already aware of it. They still kind of need help on like what the exact kind of definitions are, limitations are, nuances are. Outside of that, it tends to be I was just Googling for it and I kind of found that there are these incentives that the government
Yeah.
has to promote R&D. But still, like the program is complex enough that a large part of my early conversations with clients is always like educating them, like what is the scope of what you can claim? What are the kinds of expenses? What is the sort of documentation? Like the whole kind of ambit of that program and what it actually involves to claim those credits.
Let's talk numbers. What
Mhm.
percent of claims actually succeed?
So that's an excellent question. So the CRA actually puts out annual program statistics. So we will just refer to them. I believe
See, that's why I like
I
talking
think
to
it's about
technical people. There's no guessing. It's like,
no,
let's
no,
just pull up the
no.
numbers.
Because I can't give you like my rates, right? Like
Yeah.
mine's are like sample set. I'm going to be super biased. Okay, so about 90% of applications go through without any questions, kind of no any like requests for changes or like reviews. Um, about I want to say four to actually let me look it up. 5 to 6% are accepted post a review. Usually, it involves modifications that are kind of agreed upon by the CRA and the client. And then the remaining 4% are fully denied.
Okay. And you said that it's a bit complex. I mean, I know nothing
Mhm.
about the process. So if someone had to get started right now, they contact you, how long would it take to
Yeah.
actually get results?
Oh my gosh, I'm really going to sound like a consultant here, but I'm going to say it depends. So I'll start with the it depends and I'll kind of lay out the
Yeah.
details. So the process, if I look at it at a very high level, involves two key things. One is you have to have kind of your expenses put together. Like here, I spent Y dollars on R&D, and here is the breakdown by like salary, contractors, and materials. Okay, assuming that you have all those records set away. And then the second really large part of it is a technical report where you're communicating to the CRA in the language that they prefer. What are the challenges that you encountered that are shred eligible, how you approach solving them, and what your eventual outcome was, regardless of whether it failed or succeeded. So those are kind of the two big items. The complexity lies in a couple of key areas. One is knowing what parts of your work are actually eligible under the SHRED program. Again, it is like most things in the kind of accounting and tax world kind of open to some degree of interpretation and is somewhat
Yeah.
subjective. So knowing what is eligible and what isn't. The second one is kind of knowing what sources of documentation you shouldn't throw away. Like the number of times I've had like local Git repos in like a contractor dev's like laptop that's now like just no longer accessible to the client.
Yeah.
Just never do that. Like forget about shred. Just don't do that ever,
Yeah.
period. So knowing what sources of documentation you might need in the future, let's say the CRA comes back and is like, hey, I actually want to verify that like what you're saying is legit and we want to go through an audit process. There's a whole set of like documentation that you need to prepare for the CRA. So kind of knowing what needs to be kept and kind of stored away for the future is important. And it's always better to do it as you're creating your shred claim rather than like scrambling at the very end when the CRA comes asking for it. Um, and finally, it's a tax form that has to get filled out. And I don't know if I need to say any more, but tax forms,
Yeah.
most business owners are not going to know how to fill that out.
Yeah. And so let me get this straight. So since this is a tax credit, which means that when you're
Mhm.
filing your taxes at the end of the year, this is where you'll be able to get your money back, or
That's
are
right.
we talking about the ability to file them mid-year or during your fiscal year and then, get a pre-approval or something? Or is that not the case?
So you're thinking on an interesting thing. So normally the process is you file it along with your company's corporate income tax return. So that means end of the fiscal year.
Mm,
The pre-approval thing that you mentioned is also interesting. It's a service that the Shred division offers where you can kind of go to them with your essentially almost prepared Shred claim
mhm.
and say, hey, what do you think? So they'll go through like a review process to view all your documentation, which means you're kind of front loading a lot of your work. Um, but remember, like the your shred claim is being created for your entire fiscal year. So let's say your fiscal year, just for simplicity, is like Jan to December, right? You go to them in June. This is only going to cover the work and expenses that you've incurred from Jan to June. So it's not
Okay.
complete anyway.
Yeah,
So you still have to wait, right? Because who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months.
you're right. You're right. So let's go back to the numbers. You said that 90% go through, but if it goes through, does it mean that the entire claim is accepted? Or do they say like, okay, you're claiming X amount, but we're willing to give you Y amount?
That's the other 6%, the one with the mod where it is
Okay,
accepted after
so
modifications.
all right, all right. So modifications mean the value that you're expecting needs to be changed.
Value could be changed. They could contest the eligibility of your technical work. They could ask for supporting documentation that they want to review.
Interesting. You know what comes to mind? To me, like if I have a company now and I would probably go with someone like you and ask who should I hire and what should I do in order to get this before I actually do anything? I mean, that makes
100%.
that makes more sense
100%.
instead of like
Yeah.
hoping for the best.
Yeah. And it's also like if you think about hiring, right? Like if you're scaling up as a startup and you've got, let's say, one or two employees, and you're like, okay, like I've got a limited amount of budget. Like I'm not gonna like throw money around everywhere. And like I want to make the best possible use of the short time. How should I think about my hiring practices? Like, let's say you have an option to maybe hire some part Canadian, some part US, some part Indonesia, whatever that is, right? Um, you want to make sure that key areas of eligibility are hired within Canada so that when it comes time to claim for shred, you're not losing out only because you hired that like key technical person and they're based in some other country and you can't claim that time anymore.
Do the requirements change over time, or has it been a standard forever? And then, once you figure it out, it's gonna be the same thing all the time, or does it change every 6 months or every year? There's something else. So how does that work? Because regulations change.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. So in terms of change, let's kind of break that down. So from a program perspective, the first major change since 2014 has happened this year, where they have now allowed capital expenses to be considered as part of the eligible expenses. So by which I mean, let's say I run a machine shop, and I want to modify a 3D printer so that it can use nanomaterials. I'm making shit up right at this point. And I bought my
All
3D
good.
printer, right?
Yeah.
For all the accountants who listen to you, they already know this, but 3D printers are considered like capital expenses. So you buy it once and then you kind of use it for a couple of years until its end of life, just like your laptop or whatever, right? That you
Mhm.
buy and you kind of depreciate over time. Um, After 2014, a capital expense like this 3D printer or like this laptop would not be allowed as part of your shred claim. So salaries, materials that were kind of destroyed as part of the experiment and contractor wages. That's it. That was all that was allowed. Um, and now, as of this year, recently after the budget passed, yay, um, they have re-allowed capital expenses to be claimed. So if I am using my 3D printer in the process of my R&D, then I get to claim the portion of the time that was used for research. So that's one big change, right? So those types of program changes, in my opinion, are not going to occur very regularly because these are all going to be like, the CRA is going to make these changes, right? So they are big, sweeping. So they'll happen from time to time. That's one possible change. The other one I'd say is if when I'm a business, right, um, and I've got like a core area of focus, like I'm building a product. Um, that product is going to change and mature over time. The areas that I choose to focus are going to change over time, which means your eligibility and how you interpret eligibility is also going to change over time because it's not the exact same feature, it's not the exact same mode of MO. Your employment and contractor situation might vary if you're using materials, the kinds of materials that you think are going to be eligible, blah blah blah. All those stuff could change, right? So essentially, the core product that you're building could change over time. Um, and you want to account for those changes and how those now are going to be interpreted under the shared program. And the kind of final thing I'll say is, um, again, I'll speak to this as kind of from a like startup and small business perspective. Um, there's there's a trade-off at some point between kind of keeping everything in-house versus kind of handing it over to an external partner. Happens all the time with like your accounting and taxes, your legal, et cetera, right? You're not going to hire somebody in-house until it becomes prohibitively expensive to do this externally. Or if you say you think it's worth the ROI to actually train somebody in-house to do this on a regular basis. Um, so that would kind of be that final point. Like if you think it's worth the time to kind of build that expertise in-house and dedicate it towards like shred grants, funding, and that sort, great, excellent, right? But if you choose not to, then this becomes like an easy way to get like temporary expertise when you need it for the shred program and kind of let that go as opposed to kind of incurring the expense of having an employee on payroll that only specializes in something like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fantastic program. Honestly, I am so glad that that the whole point of its existence is to encourage R&D within Canada. We need it. The government is sending a strong message by reinforcing the program, by increasing kind of the general ambit of eligibility of the program. It's with the new changes, there'll be more in terms of dollar values that's going to be dispensed through SHRED. So the message to all Canadian innovators out there is go out and do your thing, right? We will support you. And I just love that.
Varsha, ex-IBM, ex-Amazon, you've been doing this for half a decade. You're a very
Oh, when you
likable.
say that, it makes me sound old.
I think it sounds fancier. It sounds fancier. But anyways, you know what? You're very likable. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for doing this.
Likewise, Antoine. It was a real pleasure chatting with you.
Awesome.